How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Good. It looks like we got an awesome turnout today. Hey, everybody. So one thing I like to start with, Dan, is there anything that you're learning about yourself or about life from this whole experience?
Uh, the experience of COVID, is that what you mean?
Well, just quarantine, stay at home, remote working, all that.
Yeah, so many things. I don't even know where to start. Oh, no, I know where to start. Teachers are underpaid. Um, so that's a thing. They have hard jobs. I think we all already always knew that. And I think it's like much more real now. Like, I keep saying to people, I feel very confident working for any client and like um, submitting things into their procurement systems and using these tools and that tools and Slack and Jira and Asana and this and that. I cannot for the life of me figure out how to submit my kids' homework assignments into like whatever portals we're using. It's like over there and over here and this thing and that has to tie to. I'm like, oh man, and that's not a dig on teachers at all. It's like they're figuring this stuff out too, and this is
Yeah.
hard. So that's definitely one of the big lessons for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't have kids, so I can't really relate, but I can imagine.
What are you learning through all this?
So I always kind of considered myself an ambivert, like both introverted and extroverted, but I'm learning I'm a lot more introverted than I thought I was
Oh,
because
interesting.
I'm not like freaking out and we're already like, God, I can't even remember how far in we are now into this, but like
Centuries, it feels like.
my only human interactions have been passing by neighbors in the hallway when I'm getting my mail or like getting a delivery, and that's it. And I'm okay.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think it's because I'm spending so much time on Zoom and Twitter and Slack that I don't really feel like I'm missing anything.
yeah. I've been fascinated by that concept in the last like couple of years. That like as digital or virtual, I don't know what the word is, like communities kind of pop up, like Slack and Twitter and Facebook, and like are those replacing what used to be considered communities? Like I feel like the decline of things like church is also related to the increase of of communities that people can experience elsewhere. So I'm always curious about like how that works, especially now. There's
Yeah.
like so many Zoom calls I can be on and webinars. I can like all of that is going to change how we think about community and education and learning and togetherness and all of that stuff. So I'm eager to see what that results in.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a question from Ryan. Hi, Ryan. He says, I'm on a team managing a design system for a host of B2B products, but also tasked with helping shape a rebrand of the entire organization. Do you have any experiences leading a design system that covers both products and marketing and how they can influence each other? And if so, are there any pitfalls you recommend avoiding or advice you can give to make it go smoothly?
Oh, this is a good one. Lots of threads on this one. So yeah, I have some thoughts about that, Gina. I imagine that you do too. So I'm curious about
Yeah.
your answer as well. All right. So a couple things. First is that to me, rebrand is one of the great opportunities for design systems.
Mhm.
And also in that same pool are things like replatforming or like because anytime an organization goes through a big initiative like that, there's this sense that comes with it that's like, well, while we're in there, we might as well, right? So like while we're rebranding, well, we might as well have a way to update the logo across all of our sites, right? And that's where a design system becomes part of that conversation. So the first thing that I love about rebrand is like that's a thing to hitch the design system wagon to,
Mhm.
because lots of people in an organization sometimes don't understand what a design system is, but they understand what rebrand is, or they understand what like we are replatforming, we are migrating our email servers, or whatever. They understand those, and so that's a good framing for how you can think about a design system too. Is we're moving from this thing to that thing, and we're optimizing along the way. So I love rebrands for that. In terms of like how do like product sites and like brand sites or product and marketing sites work together in one design system, I think a lot of that depends on what design system you're talking about. But I think that what it depends on is how closely related are they, like, and when I look at marketing pages that designers put together versus like product pages that designers put together. One of the big things that always exists there, I don't know, always, one of the things that often exists there is density, is a density difference, right? Where like
Yeah.
marketing pages are like airy and white space and big typography and all that kind of stuff. And product pages are like, I got to do a lot of things here. So things are smaller and itty bitty. But usually they share the same bones, right? There's like same typography. It's just that one's big and one's small. You know, they share the same color palette. It's just maybe one is emphasized in a different way than the other one is. So that's what I try to look at is like, are there enough things that are shared? And if they are, that is a great place for design tokens and theming to enter. So a lot of times, like when we work on design systems, it's about theming. It's about using a base system and then theming to create all the different outputs that you want. Because a good theme, you know, done through tokens means that I can, you know, all I have to do is change a spacing variable, you know, and that gets me, you know, really dense on product sites or really open on marketing sites. And all I had to do was swap a spacing token to get that effect. All I had to do was swap a typography token to get that effect. So those are kind of my general thoughts about how those relate together. Is I think that they can work together as a system if it's architected well to be able to take advantage of theming through things like design tokens. What do you think, Gina?
Yeah, I would approach it pretty similarly. When I was working, my first team I worked on when I was at Salesforce was a product that doesn't exist anymore, but it was called do.com. And I was on a design team of 3 people. And so I had to do a lot. Like I was doing Android design, I was doing web design, and I was doing, and within web design, I was doing web app design and marketing, and then also iOS. And so the font was different on all of those. Even between the web platforms, we used like a Helvetica and Condensed UI for the app, and then used Avenir and like a more spaced out UI for the marketing. And of course, Roboto on Android, and forgot what we were using because it was pre-San Francisco font times, but whatever we were using for iOS. But because I was the same designer working on all those things, I still was already kind of like sharing certain things across them where I could, especially between the web app and the web site. A lot of the structural bones were the same. So doing things through like, you know, this is also pre-design token, so we were doing SAS variables, but same concept, exactly. Yeah, I will say what I have seen. First of all, I agree with you that redesigns are usually a really good catalyst to get buy-in, and like Lightning Design System exists because we were redesigning the whole UI towards what at the time we were calling Solaris, which was our redesign, and then it kind of evolved into what Lightning is. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is what I've also seen is sometimes you can get a little bit, especially in large organizations, a little bit of a conflict between marketing and product, because marketing and product always think they're doing it the better way and they want the other to follow suit. So you're going to see that happen pretty often. But if you can get people talking at least and seeing where you can kind of share knowledge, it can be a lot better. Cool, great question, Ryan. Todd, hi Todd. He asked, how can I as a designer better localize or internationalize my design systems when designing for large scale products that will have a broader audience that stretches beyond the US? And does this include creating multiple design systems for each product, or can we internationalize and be inclusive to all in one centralized design system?
I don't have a strong opinion about this, partially because I haven't worked on a ton of design systems that internationalize or localize. So I'll mostly point to what I've heard other people say, and I'll insert just a few opinions. So Mina Markham, who was on this a couple of weeks ago, has a great talk about art direction and design systems, where she talks about approaching localization and internationalization on, I believe, the Slack design system. And one of the things that she points out really well in that talk is that localization and internationalization are different things. You know, one is about how can I accommodate, you know, a series of different languages and things like that. And then one is about making like cultural fit work, right? So there are cultural norms that may or may not exist across different localities. And then there's also like, well, German is just a longer language than say English, right? So how do you accommodate for that? So I think both of those have a place in there. I also tend to lean toward design tokens for that kind of stuff too, because it is on the internationalization stuff, it's again a UI problem, right? It's that like, oh, I don't have enough space for a 30 character navigation item if I design it one way, but if I shrink the font size, or if I use a condensed face, or if I do those kinds of things, then I do. And that's, you know, if it's architected well enough, that's an easy enough design token swap to say like, give me the condensed version, or give me like, let me use the condensed theme here, or let me use the smaller theme here. So that solves the internationalization problem. The localization problem, or not problem, the localization like approach is really more about content than it is about the UI, right? It's about like, maybe some of it is about UI where colors are different across cultures. So maybe that's a thing that you can solve through tokens. But you know, something like we just don't eat that way, right? It's like that is a content issue. And so that's solved more in content management systems and things like that, rather than in design systems themselves. So it's about how do all of those things work together in order to, you know, to serve different cultures, localities, and geographies.
Yeah, one of the things I learned is color can actually be perceived differently in different cultures. So for example, if you're using red to note that like maybe a stock is falling, and green to indicate that it's going up. But like in China, for example, red is associated as a color of good fortune and prosperity. And so they wouldn't really perceive red as like a negative color. And so you would probably have a contextualized set of tokens to kind of move some colors around. The other thing I liked about both in Mina's talk as well as Jennifer Hom from Airbnb gave a talk about her illustration design system. Is like illustrations can also be perceived in certain ways in cultures. So just being very mindful of, especially if you're indicating people, like how you portray those people, and what diversity looks like in the US isn't going to be the same as what it looks like in China. So yeah, awesome question. James asks, hey Dan, you had a really great blog post about typography in design systems. Love the text preset approach in SAS. What's worked for you in naming typography components? For example, components like title, header, body, caption, etc., or similar type components with lots of options.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. So the post that I wrote is like a year's worth of work in trying to figure out like what a good typography system looks like, and like trial and error with a bunch of different clients. And what I arrived at in that blog post is that I think guessability is the most important feature, right? It's like, can I guess what this thing would be? And that's where t-shirt sizes are really good, is like you can guess small, medium, large, extra large, you know, and or extra small or whatever. The problem with that becomes like, if you don't forecast well enough, do you at some point need like a schmedium in there? Hey, what's up, Chuck?
Hey.
Do you need to have like a schmedium text size, right? Or like I've worked on lots of design systems that are like medium 2, medium 3. It's like, because you know, we just don't know at that point. So what we experimented with and eventually kind of landed on, at least so far, is there's only a handful of presets that you would need. And then we just tend to order them by popularity. Like, how often are we going to use this one? And that just becomes text preset number 1. And then how often are we going to use the other one? And then that becomes text preset number 2. And that is not a foolproof system, but it's easy to test, where when we're working in SAS or working on a heading or something like that, we'll say, all right, I'm going to assign text preset 1 to this. And then I'm going to look at it and I go, it's too big. And then I'll just cycle down through. How about number 2? How about number 3? Oh, number 3 looks pretty good. And that's kind of closer to what I would do in a design tool anyway, right? Where if I'm in Photoshop or Figma or something, I'll go, if I'm going to use an 8-point scale, I'm going to have this set at 64 points. Oh, no, too big. Let me drop it down to 56. No, too big still. 48. Okay, that looks good. So I try to replicate that process just in code, you know, in SAS instead, or with variables, to say like, let me just try these different increments. And if you're limiting your type palette, which I believe that you should, I believe design systems should be as limited as they can be, right? So you're not working through multiple, like just infinite amount of options, then you only have to cycle through a maximum of 7 presets, 10 presets. And then, you know, and so if you get it wrong on the first guess, then then it doesn't really matter that much, because you can just go 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, and then one of those is going to be the thing. And then only after you exhaust those and you're like, we actually don't have a good enough thing in our system, then you could add number 8. So guessability and like easy testability is the one that I tend to do, rather than like, if we have titles, to James, to your question, if your presets are called like title, header, body, caption, I don't know what to guess the next one. If those don't work, what's the next one called? Kicker? Oh no, sorry, we call it eyebrow here. So like the
Yeah.
guessability decreases on a system like that.
That was something I used to report to a director of engineering at one of the companies I worked at in the past. And when we'd have conversations around naming things, he said, like, you want to name it the most obvious guessable thing. And that always kind of stuck with me for sure. One thing I have found helpful is I treat typography as if they are components, because they are. And sometimes I will have like my heading sets and my body copy sets. And that helps, like, you're still gonna have options, but I found like it helps like fine tune, like, I know I'm looking for a heading, these are my heading sets. And I agree, like you don't want to have like 30 headings, like that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
um,
One of the things I just tweeted about this recently is that like multiple tiers also help too, right? So like, I think with a lot of design systems that we see, especially with clients before we do work with them, they have one tier of things, right? So it's like, we have all of our variables for colors, and then they're all mapped to, this blue is this hex code and this red is this hex code. And then that's it. And what we find is if you can map multiple tiers, you actually solve for some of the mistakes. So you solve for the guessability. So one of the things that we do in all of our design systems is we have, gray, Gray, and we have that set to, whatever, 333 or 999 or whatever it is. And then we map Grey to Gray, so that it doesn't matter if somebody uses E or A, either way, they will have a good, it will work. It will work for them. Now, it's preferable for them to use the proper one, but it's like very kind about errors. So same thing is true with type. Like if you have multiple tiers, then it allows people to guess something, even if it's not the official way to do it, you kind of correct for that error.
I've done the same thing with font weights, like mapping regular to normal or semi-bold to demi-bold, or things like that, because you don't know what somebody's gonna associate with those weights. And so it's nice to give that flexibility. Yeah, awesome question. Jen asks, one of our team dreams is to have a design system that would make Brad Frost jealous. So we're curious, in your opinion, what are the things that are shining beacons of frosty envy?
Oh,
I love this question.
That's a great question. Okay. Thanks, Jen, for that. This is good. Man, I definitely haven't been asked that one before. I don't have a canned answer for it, but I can sound it out. Okay, so a couple of things that I know about Brad from working with him is that Brad really appreciates consistency. He's less particular, I think, about what you're consistent about, right? And I think the thing that we see when we work together and we work on client design systems is like, well, you're doing it this way over here and you're not doing it that way over there, right? And it doesn't matter which one that actually is. So one is just like, if you can be consistent across the board, that's a good thing. Another thing is kind of a misinterpretation of atomic design, right? So like, I think a lot of people hear and have read stuff that Brad has written and said, and say like, oh, atomic design means we should just work on the atoms, right? And then like we start with the atoms, and then we build the atoms into molecules, then we build the molecules into organisms, and then into and Brad has never said that, at least not that I'm aware of. Like he's always talked about atomic design as a methodology that you work sort of like outside in, where like you work on the atoms and the pages at the same time, and you almost arrive at the organisms, right? Like you kind of work your way inward. And there's some, I'm probably not doing this justice, as well as he would kind of talk about this stuff, but you kind of work your way inward, and one side of that spectrum is abstract and the other side is concrete. And that relates to who works on what, right? So stakeholders, you don't want to show them a bunch of atoms, right? Because it's too abstract. Like stakeholders who are, product owners or your VP of finance is not going to care about what atoms you have in the design system. And yet that's what designers and developers talk about, because we work at that level of abstraction. And so it's this mismatch between like where are you talking about and working on the concrete stuff, and where are you talking about and working on the abstract stuff? And I think that like a design system that prioritized pages, over atoms, I think would be one that Brad would be proud of, to look at like, yes, you're doing it well, but knowing that for the designers and developers working on it, they understand how all those pieces are broken down into smaller things rather than small things built up into larger things. So I don't know, those are the two things that occur to me that I think Brad would, he would pat some backs for.
I love frosty envy. I'm gonna have to use that. I notice he also appreciates just well thought through documentation that has all your bases covered. Like I've noticed, like he created that style guide template, which is like not necessarily meant to be, follow this exactly, but it's like, here's all the things you could have in your design system based on what I've seen other design systems have. And he seems to really appreciate like lots of documentation that's been thought through really well.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. We had a conversation a while back on the topic of pricing, and you're like, you wrote the book on pricing design. And if you're interested in going through what your approach is for that, that'd be awesome. But I would love to hear, how did you come to that decision for how you approach pricing?
Yeah, sure. So my basic premise around pricing is that there's kind of a couple parts to it. The first is that price what the project is worth or what the job is worth to your customer, and then always charge a price below that. That way you will always ensure that your customer is profitable. That's different than billing hourly or billing weekly or monthly or like, that's different than saying this is my rate and multiply my rate times whatever unit of time I'm measuring in. And my general philosophy about pricing, and this is probably true of a lot of people who talk about value pricing, is the point of what we are doing is to try to create as much value for your customer as possible. Like that's what we as professionals should be focused on, is like, how can we create a lot of value? How can we make our clients and customers shine? And if they shine, then we can get a little kickback from that. The more they shine, the higher the kickback is, right? Like, but if you don't make your client shine, why would you expect to do well yourself too, right? Our jobs are, that's what success is for us, is to like do good things and make great things for our customers. And if we're doing that, then we will get some benefit from that too. And that's the point of value pricing. So how I arrived from that was, I worked at a bunch of agencies. I'm only Super Friendly is the first time I've been independent, so the last 8 years, I've always worked at agencies. And so I'd freelance too. I'd always freelance on the side. And because I worked a full-time job during the day, I had a lot of leverage in being really choosy and being really adventurous in my freelancing. So I would charge astronomical rates to clients just to see if they would pay it, as I was testing out, like, what's the tolerance that clients have? And I learned a lot of things by doing that. And the reason that I could be choosy was because if they said no, it's like, well, I already have a full-time job. I'm paid pretty well. Like, I don't need the cash. I'm just doing this for fun. So if it's fun for me and the risk is low, I can try new things. And so things I learned were like, I learned what my threshold was for as high of a rate as I could get. I would try, billing hourly, I could not charge a client more than $250 an hour before they were just like, you're a lunatic. Like, I can't, like, there's no way that I could pay you more than I pay my lawyer or a doctor, or like, and what I learned was, oh, they see me on the same level as like their plumber, right? Like, so whatever they pay their plumber is kind of what they want to pay their web designer, not what they want to pay their lawyer. I'm like, okay, that's a good lesson. And I also learned, like, a big lesson for me was, when people want things, they are willing to pay a lot for them. And when they don't want them as much, they will pay little for them. And it sounds so obvious, but I remember there was a time where, as a freelancer, I could only work on, 1 or 2 projects at a time at most. So I would tell clients like, well, I'm already booked up for 6 months now. Like, cause I have one project that's going to take me 6 months, cause I'm doing it nights and weekends. And a client, I had one client that would ask like, well, can I book you 6 months from now? And I was like, well, I mean, that's cool, but like, I don't want to, because what if you bail 5 months out? And I've turned down clients already. Like, I don't want that. So if you want to book me 6 months out, then you have to send me an extra $10,000 hold, right? That's what I want. And that was, to me, that was a blow off price. That was like, I know he's not going to do it. It's just a way, like, just didn't have enough courage to say no outright. So I gave him the blow off price. And he never responded, but I opened my mailbox one day and there was a check for $10,000 in it. And I was like, whoa, like, totally did not expect that. And I was like, and that taught me, like, when people really want something, they are willing to do things that you think are outrageous. And I'm like, all right, so that has influenced my pricing policies. Like, if I can find out what people really want, then that is worth a lot to them. It might mean a big effort on my part, but that's where high prices come from, is finding out what's really worth a lot to your client. And then you can charge a portion of that to say, all right, if that thing that you're asking for is going to make you $2 million extra next year, well, would you pay 10% of that to get that $2 million? Would you pay me $200,000 if I knew that I could get you that 2 million next year? And most of the times the answer is like, yeah, probably.
That's so awesome. Hope everybody took away something from that. So we're coming up on time. So one thing I like to conclude with is there anything you have coming up that we can look out for, as well as ways the community can support you?
Ooh, thank you for asking that. So coming up, so Super Friendly specializes in design systems. We are trying to do lots of things for the design community, design systems community, excuse me, because it's something that we're interested in. We think it's something that has value. Some of those things are going to be free. Some of those things are going to be premium. Some of those things are going to be somewhere in between. So we have a lot of stuff coming out. One of the things that's coming out, I don't know if I've actually said this anywhere publicly, but so one of the things that we're going to debut soon is a way for teams to kind of like get our take on what their design system is. So like a formalized way to kind of do an audit and to do some diagnostic work for your design system. So we're going to launch that sometime soon. So that's coming out soon. We're also going to start to do a lot more like things that just benefit the community, whether that's like free templates and starter kits and stuff. We just published this morning an article about, like, if you're designing a reference site from scratch, like, here's some good sections that you might want to include and why those are important. So, lots of things like that, that just say, like, if you're doing this work already, here's some things that might help you out in it. So, and then the latest thing was that we just launched a podcast called Get It Out of Your System, which asks people one question, which is like, what's the hardest thing you're dealing with in design systems right now? And then we talk for as long as that answer takes. So that's sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes. And so always looking for new guests for that too. So if anybody's interested in that, let me know, drop me a line. I'm at Dan Mall on Twitter, or dan@superfriend.ly. You can email me too. So yeah, I think those are the things that we could use some help with and some support on.
That's awesome. I love the concept for the podcast. That's cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you everybody for coming. And thank you so much, Dan, for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. Thanks for asking me. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.